Well, fantastic. I have a number of questions as a follow-up. Well, one thing I wanted to get your opinion on is, to what extent do you think the popular conception or the popular endorsement of privacy as a right has changed over time? Because as you were telling that story about DoubleClick and how they were collecting cookies and they were building a profile of you, I was thinking, well, everyone does that now all the time, and most of us don't have a big problem with it. We just know that if we say, corduroy pants out loud, probably we're going to get Facebook ads for those tomorrow. Like, that's just a fact of life now. So do you think that things have, well, I guess in what ways have things changed over time? And do you think that's good or bad?
So in the modern era, I mean, privacy in many ways goes back to Bible and Talmud. And, if you want to go back, I'll take you all the way back to the earliest sources for privacy in the Bible. So this has been part of Roman law and Jewish law and Bible law and Quran, you name it. Every tradition and every culture has a real deep and interesting history, sometimes very legalistic. There's a famous Talmudic debate of, you live in an apartment building and you have a window and, you're looking out and you enjoy your view. All of a sudden, your neighbor across the courtyard punches a window through his window, and now he can see into yours. Do you have the legal right to say, hey, close up your window, you're now invading my privacy? And there's all kinds of wonderful analysis. Well, was it a public courtyard? You didn't really have any privacy because it was a public courtyard. Anybody could have seen in. No, but maybe it's a private courtyard, in which case you did, and you have some legal rights. So right. There's a ton of history. But in the modern era, we go back, unfortunately, to the Holocaust and the Nazi era, where the early predecessors of the IBM computer, the Hollerith machines, were used by Nazis to very efficiently record and track and use population registries to know where are the Jews, where are where are the disabled people, where are the lists and categories of people we need to go building by building, right, to find out, hey, is there anybody on our list in this building? And so the notion that this automated processing, right, not just the typical privacy, does anyone know what you're up to? Can you go to the next village, and escape it? In the city, you can be anonymous. You live in a small village, everyone knows your business, right? Those kinds of issues were always around, forever. Could you start a new life, by going overseas? You had some indiscretion, right? Go overseas. Who knows, right? The information didn't follow with you. So we've always had those sorts of issues. But the more modern era of sort of digital and automated processing, putting these issues in a whole nother scale, really were kicked off by the Nazi era, where the whole notion that, a government, a hostile entity, could use the power of lists and registries and data to really, oppress and kill. And so European countries, and then again, you had a lot of countries, the Stasi, right? The secret police, people being paid to inform. If you visit Berlin, there's a phenomenal museum where every sort of little device that was used by Nazis, by East Germans, by hostile folks to sort of spy on the population, to keep registries, to have everybody report on everybody. So in Europe, because of recent history and the notion that the government was spying on you, or your neighbors were reporting on you, and the notion that to do that at a population level, you needed computers and databases. So you really had this deep feeling that you needed laws, data protection laws, to protect the individual against, the power of government and what government might do and due process. In the US, we also started becoming aware of concerns, when Social Security was rolled out, right? And Social Security, obviously, great benefit, right? The first, big New Deal plan that ensured that you get money taken away and saved for you, for your employer. But the outcry that existed when Social Security rolled out, because until then you showed up and your employer said, how old are you? Are you married? And if you were a woman of a certain age, you gave the right answer. And you didn't worry that they might know that maybe you were married, maybe you weren't married. Were they going to, were you going to, was your husband going to tell you not to work? Were you going to have kids? wasn't their business. And there was really no way they could find out. But suddenly you gave in your social security number and you had an official government identity, and they worried, will my employer now know things about me that he or she has got no business knowing? So, we started seeing areas where people were concerned initially about government. And then all of a sudden, companies came along and started having these same large digital dossiers about me. In the US, we moved quickly to regulate government. So we've long had a very strong Privacy Act, right? We don't believe the government should have secret databases, right? We know, yes, that the FBI will spy on us if they think, that we're a threat, right? We have all this history of Martin Luther King being spied on and, J. Edgar Hoover having different enemies lists and so forth. So we've long had laws in the US that say, government, you want a database? You declare it. You publish it in the Federal Register. I have to know whether I'm in there. I can make a freedom of information, request. It's not perfect, but we get that the US government spies, has to have restrictions, has to have a warrant for certain information. They can't just go and demand it. A judge may have to be involved depending on what kind of information it is. So we've understood, as have the Europeans, for quite a long time, that the power of government and how it can use data, because it can put us in jail, it can ruin our lives, has to be in check. In the US, however, we were much more open to companies. Well, what do they want to do? They want to show us some ads. They want to sell us some stuff. Not so in Europe. The Europeans, despite the fact that the government really was, the actor in World War II and in, these other countries where surveillance and oppression existed. But companies were sometimes the tools, right? It was that counting machine. So they regulated holistically, and they long put in place rules that said, no, you just can't collect data. They weren't all that serious about enforcing it, frankly. And they didn't really fund the independent data protection authorities who they created. In Europe, every country has to have a fully independent data protection authority who cannot be, fired by the government because he or she actually oversees the government and, tells the government to stop, doing this or that. It's a bit unusual, though. You have to understand each culture has their own way. In Norway, if you make more than, I believe it's 100,000 euros a year, your name gets published by the tax authority. They've decided that that's an important way to, in a society that is a bit more homogenous than in the US. If you're making that kind of money, well, you got to be there public. So we know about that and we scrutinize it. In the US, can you imagine? Or, publishing your income, if you made more than a certain amount of money, we'd go nuts. We can't even see the president's tax returns, right? After years of battling and arguing. In Germany, which has some of the strictest data protection laws, people walk around naked and hop into public saunas, right, in front of the kids. And, here we're, naked, oh my God, right? But we have, so each country does have its own cultural norms that maybe prioritizes. And in the US, we didn't for a very long time think that companies really needed to be, we wanted innovation. We believed in self-regulation. The market works, right? We believe in the market in the US. So if people don't like it, then they won't use your product. They'll go to the company with more privacy, right? Apple, in many ways, is, trying to define itself as the leader on privacy, and, advertising and really talking about it. So privacy has gone from, in the US at least, from being something that most of us didn't think a lot about unless we really were worried about the government and that sort of thing. We read about cookies and sort of tracking, maybe we thought we ought to be doing more to clear cookies, but we didn't really see it in the US as a deep human right. Maybe when it came to keeping government from putting us in jail, we get that that's a human right? Don't put us in jail without the evidence, without our ability to, right? But is a cookie or is how many emails I get something that is a human right? And increasingly around the world, I think countries, including the US, are coming around to the notion, and it isn't just Tim Cook, Satya Nadella at Microsoft, dozens of CEOs you've heard echo, this notion, and it's actually in the constitution of a number of states, that digital privacy, that informational privacy, is actually a human right.